Hello and welcome back, and everybody, Levi here. Today I've got a brand new deck tech here for you guys. I was recently reading a mono black commander the other day, and I noticed that the first time I read it, I did not read it properly, so I'll go over the card here for you. It's Kaervek the Punisher, 1 black for a 3/3 human warlock. It says whenever you commit a crime, exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard and copy it. You may cast the copy, and if you do, you lose 2 life. So typically with black commanders that deal with your graveyard, it's going to be creature cards that you are allowed to get out of your graveyard. Unlike Kaervek the Punisher, you are allowed to get any black card out of your graveyard, so this lets black wander into new strategies where it hasn't really gone before, such as SPELLSLINGER, which is what I went for with this build. So the majority of the deck is going to be mostly targeted removal, making sure we keep our opponents in check while also committing crimes so we can get little payoffs. So I guess the first thing I'll go over here is just some of the removal I picked, just some of the lesser known ones, I suppose. The first one I have here, Bile Blight. Black for an instant. Target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature get -3/-3 until end of turn. So you can use this a couple different ways just to kill off a creature. Say your opponent has some sort of low toughness value creature that you want off the board. You can just use this on that, or you could use it on what you probably should be saving it for, which is your opponent's tokens. If your opponent's playing like a squirrel tribal deck and they have tons of squirrel tokens, you use the Bile Blight on one of the squirrels, and that will kill all other creatures named squirrel. So really handy at killing tokens. Then I got some really cheap cards like Stab, 1 black mana for an instant. Target creature gets -2. So this one's more to just kind of lower our mana curve since we are going to be double casting a lot of cards with our commander's ability. It's nice that we have some of these lower cost cards that we can commit crimes with that also do a little bit of work. The -2/-2 for 1 mana is actually really not a bad rate at all. Another good one that I would definitely play in a deck like this, a Debt to the Kami, 2 and a black for an instant. You choose one. Target opponent exiles a creature they control, or they exile an enchantment they control. So this is basically just another way to get enchantments off of the board in mono black. There's not a lot of ways to do it. There is the new one that just came out, Withering Torment, but especially in a Spellslinger deck, I feel like you definitely have room to throw in extra cards like this that deal with enchantments. And every time I've cast this in a game, it's usually done what I pretty much want it to do. Most people don't have like 5 or 6 enchantments. They probably have like 2, maybe 3, and they're all really good. So, getting one off the board is pretty much all you can ask for. In a mono black deck, you can't really pick and choose what you got for the most part. So Debt to the Kami is a really good one. I also try to throw in a couple fun removal spells, such as This Is How It Ends, a Doctor Who card, 3 and a black for an instant. Target creature's owner shuffles it into their library, then faces a villainous choice, meaning they just choose one of the two. You either lose 5 life, or they shuffle another creature they own into their library. So it kind of gives them a little bit of decision-making power when it comes to like what they want to do. If they just want to lose the 5 life, that's good for us. If they want to shuffle on another creature, that's good for us too. And then how can I go a video without talking about one of my favorite spells that came out last year? Vats, 2 black for an instant with split second. Choose any number of target creatures with equal toughness, destroy the chosen creatures. So this card's just great in every black deck. I play it in pretty much every black deck I can, and I definitely want to give this a mention every chance I get. So that just gives us a little bit of insight into what kind of removal spells we're looking for here. Now I'll go over some of the payoffs and what we actually get besides killing creatures for using all these removal spells. So if we stick with the committing a crime theme, we've got Vladimir New Blood, 1 and a black for a 2/2 vampire rogue. It says whenever you commit a crime, which we'll be doing a lot in this deck obviously, you put a +1/+1 counter on Vladimir, but only once per turn, and as long as Vladimir has 4 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it has menace and lifelink. So lifelink being the important part there. We are paying 2 life for every card that we cast out of our graveyard with Kaervek's ability, so being able to get some of that life back is definitely going to keep us in the game and is really essential in a deck like this. Similarly to that one, I've got Bloodsky Berserker, 1 and a black for a 1/1 human berserker. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Bloodsky Berserker, and it gains menace until end of turn. I think in Commander these days, people kind of underestimate just having a giant creature that has some sort of evasion like menace. It's obviously not the best payoff in the world, but seeing as how we're going to be definitely casting our second spell every single turn with our commander's ability, you target one thing, cast another thing out of the graveyard, so it's guaranteed to get second spell every turn. Bloodsky Berserker is going to grow huge in no time. And I've also got some payoffs for just casting instant or sorceries, such as Dynavolt Tower, 3 mana artifact. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get 2 energy. You can also pay 5 energy to have Dynavolt Tower deal 3 damage to target creature or player. So most of the time, I assume we're not going to be shooting creatures with this because we have enough targeted removal. However, we could if we wanted to. Another cool thing about this, when you pay the energy to shoot something, you're also committing a crime, which lets you cast something out of your graveyard. Kind of in the same vein, when casting instant or sorceries, we get a little bit of value from that. Geometric Nexus, 2 mana artifact. Whenever a player, so this one includes your opponents, casts an instant or sorcery spell, put a number of charge counters on Geometric Nexus equal to that spell's mana value. Then later in the game, you can pay 6 X mana, tap it, remove all the charge counters from it, and you make a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, and you put X/1/1 counters on it, which obviously X is the number of charge counters removed this way. So, you know, just put this out turn 2, cast a bunch of instant sorceries. Later in the game, if you need a giant creature, you pay the 6 mana into it. By the time, you know, turn 10, 11 rolls around, especially in a Spellslinger deck, but also your opponents are going to be casting, you know, Rampant Growths, cards like that, their own Path to Exile, just going to be piling counters on this, and you're going to get a huge creature by the end of it. Another great payoff here, Sedgemoor Witch, 2 and a black for a 3/2 human warlock with menace, ward, pay 3 life. It's also not bad. Whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. So like I was talking about with Vadmir, gaining life off of our little tokens dying is a really helpful thing in this deck. We need to be keeping our life total at least padded a little bit, kind of similar to the Dynavolt Tower. We have Sentinel Tower, 4 mana artifact. Whenever an instant or sorcery spell is cast during your turn, Sentinel Tower deals damage to any target equal to 1 plus the number of instant and sorcery spells cast before that spell this turn. So it just gets stronger and stronger with each instant or sorcery spell that you cast, and you can just start pinging stuff around, which also incidentally helps trigger our commander. Got a pretty interesting one here. I really like this card in this deck. River Song's Diary, 3 mana artifact. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell from their hand, exile it instead of putting it into a graveyard as it resolves. So very similar to the Geometric Nexus. This also gets instant and sorceries from your opponents. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, however, if there are 4 or more cards exiled with River Song's Diary, choose one of them at random and you may cast it for free. So what this does is instead of casting our stab, putting it into the graveyard and then getting to reuse it, it goes into exile and then to our graveyard after that. So we get 3 uses out of our instant and sorceries as opposed to just 2. Really, really strong card here, especially with how many cards we're casting. Got a couple more cards that are going to be creating some tokens for us. Tormod the Desecrator, 3 and a black for a 4/2 zombie wizard. Whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. So considering we're going to be having lots of instant and sorceries basically leaving our graveyard from our commander's ability, we're just going to be getting extra 2/2s on top of that. So that's pretty nice. And probably the best for creating tokens in this deck is Gisa the Hellraiser, 3 black for a 4/4 human warlock, has ward, pay 2 and 2 life. It says skeletons and zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace, so that also works well with our Tormod. And it says whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens, but only once per turn. So absolutely insane value. This gives you 2 2/2s, but they're essentially 3/3s as long as the Gisa sticks around. So you're making 3/3s with menace whenever you commit a crime. It's just insane value every single turn. You can do it on your opponent's turns as well. Just this absolutely floods your board with an army of little tokens. Next up here, just a couple of ramp pieces to talk about. Sticking with the committing a crime theme, I have Bandit's Hall, 3 mana artifact. Whenever you commit a crime, put a loot counter on Bandit's Hall. This ability triggers only once to each turn. It's also a 3 mana rock because it taps for 1 mana of any color, but it's also card draw. You pay 2, tap it, remove 2 loot counters from Bandit's Hall to draw a card. So just great. Put this out early, tap it for mana. Later in the game, you don't need the mana, so you use it to draw cards. Another really cool addition to this deck, Seance Board out of Duskmourn, 2 mana artifact, has Morbid. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you put a soul counter on Seance Board. Considering most of our instant and sorceries are removal, it's pretty likely that this will be happening a lot, and creatures just die in combat and incidentally throughout the game. It says tap, add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of soul counters on Seance Board. Spend this mana only to cast instant, sorcery, demon, and spirit spells, so obviously we're going to be using it to cast our instant or sorceries. Really amazing mana rock in this deck. However, last up, I've got the utility category, just some cards that don't really fit into the other categories, but really help bring our deck together. Like I was talking about with Vadmir, incidental life gain is really crucial in this deck, so I threw in Demon's Horn. It's a 2 mana artifact. Whenever a player casts a black spell, your opponents included, you gain 1 life. So every time you're casting stuff out of your graveyard with your commander's ability, you're losing 2 life, but you're also gaining the 1 life because the spells in your graveyard have to be black, so that will trigger your Demon's Horn, basically having the amount of life that you have to pay for each of your spells. I also threw in Marrow Bone Gnar, 1 black mana for a 1/1 Merfolk Rogue. It says tap, target player exiles a card from their graveyard, and then whenever you cast a black spell, you may untap Marrow Bone Gnar. So the main reason this is in the deck, obviously Graveyard Hate is good, but the main reason this is in the deck is because this lets us commit a crime basically whenever we want. So you tap this, somebody exiles something out of their graveyard, that's you committing a crime, you cast something out of your graveyard, then that's you playing a black spell that untaps it. So it's a little combo-ish thing you can get going here if you want to, and if your opponents have enough cards in their graveyard, I suppose. And this one is a little expensive, so understandable if you don't want to throw it in your deck. I usually don't put cards over $5 in my deck, but this is just such a sweet, sweet addition in this deck. Poxwalkers, 2 and a black for a 3/1 zombie with Death Touch. Really great that has Death Touch because it's a great blocker. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, return a Poxwalkers from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. So what this does is anytime we use our commander's ability to cast those cards out of our graveyard, this, if it's in our graveyard, goes back to the field. So you can either leave it up as a permanent death touch blocker, or you can swing out for 3 damage every single turn. Your opponents most likely are not going to block it because they don't want to lose their creature, just for your creature to easily be resurrected with that ability. And last but not least, I threw in a really fun card here, Shriveling Rot, 2 black for an instant. You choose one. Until end of turn, whenever a creature is dealt damage, you destroy it, or until end of turn, whenever a creature dies, that creature's controller loses life equal to its toughness. It also has Entwine for 2 and a black, which means you can choose both of them if you pay the Entwine cost, which would bring this card up to a 7 mana value total. So many ways you can use this card. You know, opponent A is attacking opponent C, and you know, they have a bunch of creatures that they're going at each other with in combat. There's a bunch of blocks. Some creatures would normally die, some creatures wouldn't, but if you want to cast your Shriveling Rot for 4 mana, it'll just make sure that every creature that is in combat and is hitting other creatures will die. Also, let's just say same scenario, a bunch of creatures are about to die in combat, or somebody's about to cast like a Blasphemous Act or a board wipe or something like that and, you know, destroy the whole board. Say your opponents have a lot more creatures than you do, you can cast it for the second effect and then have your opponents lose a ton of life equal to the amount of, you know, toughness that they have on the board. This can single-handedly win you the game in the right situation. I really like versatile cards like this, especially in a deck that just wants you to be playing instant sorceries. Just a fantastic card all around. I think it should see more play. But that is all I've got for my mono black Kaervek Spellslinger deck. This is the only mono black Spellslinger deck I've ever seen. I've never built another one. I've never tried to. I never thought about it, but honestly, I really like the decision they did to put black card as opposed to black creature card, because it opens up to so many different possibilities, like this really wacky and weird deck. If you want to check out my full deck list, I have the architect link down in my description. Go ahead and give that a click. If you liked this video, if you like my builds, go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you want to check out some more of my future content, future deck techs that I'm going to be putting out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support lately, and I will see you in the next video. All right, take care.